everyone. Welcome to Miss Loreens's Schoolhouse, and I'm doing a little series on beginning machine applique, and we're going to use one of Patchability's patterns called the Easter eggs, and it's MM04. And I picked this because it's fairly simple. The shapes are nice and big. There's no little intricate pieces, and when we get into the second in the series and the third in the series, we'll address more of that, but this is a good place to start. So the first thing we want to think about is, as much as the Easter eggs are all pretty in that, but let's get this background, and that's actually a border going around there, and let's get those picked out and cut first, because in some cases these eggs are going to go over these pieces, and also whatever you might pick for your borders. For example, here's my center fabric, which is this one right behind the eggs. And these will be my borders. This fabric will be my borders. And the reason I wanted to make sure I picked those, and it'll kind of go like this. And let me face it towards you. Oh. And then this is my basket fabric at the bottom. Though even though it's really a lot longer, I'm just going to give you an idea of how I go about starting this. So I wanted to make sure I picked my border pieces first, because I didn't want to cut my fabrics up for the eggs and then find out I didn't have enough left for the border, or whatever I might want for the border I won't want with my eggs. So I try to pick the big pieces of fabric you always want to cut first, but you want to get this part done, and we'll get to this in the second video of sewing this part together, because we have to have this sewn together, which is the whole background, before we put the eggs down, because some of the eggs are going over the border or over the basket. But for now, we'll just get those fabrics cut and set them aside. So I'm just going to fold those up and set them aside. I've just got a bunch of scraps that I have, because you always want to, especially when you start doing applique, you always want to have a bunch of scraps around, because you may need like this little zigzag piece, little rickrack, or you could put, if you had some real rickrack, you could put that on there. They do make rickrack, pretty wide at times. So whatever you want to add on, but this is generally kind of, your leftover scraps. And if you don't have leftover scraps, as you start doing these, you'll get more and more little leftovers to put in your pile. So the first thing we want to look at with any pattern that has applique is we want to know, and let me just open mine up. And the instructions, if you're following this along, the instructions, and I'm not going to show it out because it's not fair to people who bought it, but the instructions for cutting the background fabrics that I showed you a minute ago, they're all right there at the beginning. But what we want to look for in our pattern is to make sure that the pieces are either reversed for fusible applique, which is what we're going to do, or they're not reversed. In this case, it says, and again, I'm not going to hold this quite straight too, because, it's copyright infringement. But this says that the eggs are drawn reversed for use with fusible webbing. Okay? So let me just put that down for a second. Fusible webbing, the brand I use is Steamacine 2 Light. So Light Steamacine 2. That's my particular brand that I like. The light means, L-I-T-E, means it's a little thinner, so it's not as stiff. And 2 means it's 2 pieces of paper, one on each side. So here's one side of the paper, here's the other side of the paper, and the glue, the webbing, is in between those 2 pages, because we're going to draw on one side and cut it out, and then we want to have paper on the back, excuse me, that doesn't come off until we're ready to put it onto our background. So that's what I use. The other thing you'll want to have is an applique pressing sheet, And this is silicone. And so that if you get any of that fusible webbing on it, it'll peel right off, because you want this between your ironing board and your iron, with your fabric and fusible in between, because that is glue, and it does, get stuck on your iron and stuff. So you want an applique pressing sheet, and I will put the one I use, you can see here. I will put a link to the one I use, along with a link to the steam machine that I use, in the description, so you can go out and see what it actually looks like close up. But for right now, we don't need the applique pressing sheet, and I just made sure I held out the instructions for whatever fusible webbing you use, the ironing instructions, because each brand could be a little bit different, so I want to make sure I have that. So what I want to look at first is my eggs, and I'll just set them down like that, move some of this out of the way. Here we go. Oh. There we go. So we have a little picture. And what we want to do first is we want to trace our shapes. Now you could use a light box. In most cases, especially with the patch abilities, the lines are nice and dark. So let me see if you can see it okay. Let me move my little fabrics out of the way. And see, you can see that I can see those eggs right through the paper. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start tracing. And let me come in just a little bit more. Here we go. Okay? And these are eggs. You don't have to be perfect with it. I use a mechanical pencil, so you want to use some kind of pencil. You never want to use ink pen, because ink and fabric really don't go together. And when you use it and all of a sudden there's an ink blob on your fabric, they have no clue where it came from, then you'll stop using that ink pen. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the plain egg first. And plain, I mean it's just the egg with no decorations on it. And I'm just tracing around. And again, if your hands are a little shaky, that's okay. So see right here, I got a little shakiness going. I'm going to cut these with scissors, so I'm going to be able to make that a little bit smoother when I go ahead and get ready to cut it out. And I'm going to put down C, because that is egg C. Okay, so that's just a simple egg. So let's go to this one right here. And I don't need much distance in between each one, because there's no seam allowance involved. So I'm going to do the one with the stripe. And you see how you can see the stripe there. So first I want to draw the egg. And I'm drawing a little bit faster than I normally would, because I'm recording this. So see, I got that little bit there. I could erase it, but it really isn't necessary, because I know I don't want to cut out in that piece. And this is egg B, so I'm going to put a B. Now I have a stripe. Well, that stripe is going to go on top of the egg. So my fabric for the egg, my fabric for the egg is a whole egg. So now I want to do the stripe by itself, because that's going to be a different fabric. So I'm going to, and let me see, I can go ahead and put that way over this end and use up some room over here. Okay, so you see, there's my little stripe. And I want to make sure that I come out far enough. And you don't have to be exact on your lines, because nobody's going to know that you didn't do it exactly as the pattern is. And then I'm going to put B. Okay, I really don't need to put stripe, because it's a stripe. But now I know this B goes with B egg. Okay? And the same thing with D. So let me just do D. And you know, you can do this in Easter colors, pastel Easter colors. You can do it in black and whites or whatever you want. Mix it up a little bit. So this is D. So I'm putting the D. And if I didn't point out, you notice that I'm drawing on the side that has the grid. So see how that nice yellow grid is there? And there's nothing on this side. This paper is made to come off second. This paper is made to come off first, which means it's not as clingy to the web, fusible web, as this one is. So I want to make sure I draw on the correct side. And that was D, and D has a stripe. I'm just going to come over right here, and you can see that. I want to make sure that if I'm not certain, I want to come outside the lines with my stripe, because I can always trim it back to fit the egg. And what is this, D? But I can't add on to it once it's done. And if you want to, when you trace something, just put a little check mark that you traced it. So we got B and B stripe. So I haven't done E yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do E. Now E seems like a much bigger egg. Could be my imagination, but we'll know. So E. And then I'll go ahead. A little, there we go. A little pattern picture has come down. So the last one I have to do is A, and I can do the stripes now first. So let me back this up a little ways. There we go. So when I do the stripes, if I want them both on the same fabric, so I'm going to say I want them both on the same fabric. So I'm going to put them closer together so that I can fuse them onto the same fabric at the same time. And you'll see what I mean. It'll save you a little bit of time. And I'm going to put A. And then I'm just going to move. I'm going to move my paper. So it doesn't matter how close I get them. I could get them a little closer if I wanted to. And I'm coming out past the egg again just to be on the safe side. Now, it doesn't have to line up with the top one. That's not necessary at this time. It only needs to line up when you're putting it on the egg. And this is also A. And now I just need to do egg A. And I'm just going to turn it and fit it right in that little spot there. And if on your pattern you want to have more eggs, you can do that. You can do whatever you'd like on yours, because you're not going to be hanging, you're not going to hang the pattern next to your pretty Easter egg hanger. So nobody will know if you're exactly the same or not. So we've got all our pieces cut, traced. So now I'm just going to take, I got my paper scissors, and I'm just going to loosely cut around. So I can take the rest of my paper, save it for another project, and I'm going to just come around. I'm not cutting it perfect now. I don't need to. Because if I cut it perfect now, I got to cut it perfect again in a few minutes. I just cut that extra piece off. And you notice I don't turn my scissors. I'm turning my paper. Hope I'm not making you too dizzy there. And I'm just piling everybody up. Now you remember, I'm going to have my zigzags, both from the same fabric, so I'm going to keep them together. And you can save some of the little pieces of steam-a-seam because there's lots of times you'll have little eyes or a little bird or a little flower. So I just keep them in a little Ziploc bag. Now, I probably wouldn't keep those pieces, and I would go ahead and cut off that. But I would keep, I'll show you what I'd keep. I would keep those. And I would throw away this. I would keep these in a little Ziploc bag. And then my last one, and we'll just get rid of those. And these would go in a little Ziploc bag. So now we have all our pieces cut. And you notice we just did a rough cut. So I'll give you a minute to go ahead and get your pieces all cut. And I'll line up my fabrics so I'll show you what we're going to do next. Okay, so I thought I'd start with the easiest part first. And I noticed that I have 2 eggs. Let me bring that around a little bit. I have 2 eggs that are just plain. So I've decided I want one of those eggs with this polka dot. And the other egg I want with this fabric. And because this fabric is longer, I'll be able to place that egg in whichever section I want. So let's do the easy one first. Now I'm going to take my pieces and I'm going to put my D with the D and just set them over there, and my A with the A and my B with the B. So now I know here's my two plain eggs. So I'm going to trim a little bit more of this off because I feel like the pointy things are a little distracting. So I've got my fabric, and I want to remember this is glue. I want to make sure I turn my fabric over, and I'm putting this egg, steam-a-seam egg, on the back. So when I pull this away, I want to make sure that this side with the drawing on it feels sticky. That's where the web is. I think you can see it. It's a little shininess. Okay? And I'm just going to place that on. Now I can place it however I want if I need to line my dots up in some direction. But I'm going to get that placed. I'm not going to iron it yet. And I'm just going to set that aside. And sometimes I hang on to these papers if I need to put some little pieces down. In this case, it's got a big wrinkle in it, so I'm going to get rid of that. Now, here's my egg C. And now I can look, and I'm going to look at the front first because it's easier for you to see. But maybe I want this yellow to be through the middle of my egg. Now, when I turn it over, I can see where the yellow is. I'm not sure if you can, but I can see where that yellow is. And I think I'd like those yellow stripes because it looks like a yellow stripe going across. I think I want the yellow going across the middle. So again, I'm going to take that paper off. I'm going to double check, make sure the sticky is on the side where the drawing is. And I'm going to place that down. And let's see if you can see. Oop. And in this case, I want to get my egg kind of straight so that my yellow goes right through the middle. Now, I could have placed it down here, and I would have had different colors, or up this way where the blue and purple is. But I kind of went, let me go a little yellow and orange instead of yellow and green. So I'm in between where my fingers are. Okay? And I'm just going to cut off that extra piece and put it in my pile of pieces I'm going to save. And I'm just going to set this in the pile. Now, this has got a little bit of stickiness to it, so it should be fine right there. So now I've got B. So if I look, B is the one that has just the one stripe through it. So I think that maybe I'll use this pink fabric, though I don't know, I've got a pink one there. Let's go this way. I'm going to use this yellow fabric, and the green will be my stripe. Now, my fabric is wrinkly, so I need to give it a little quick press, because when I get ready to press on the fusible web, the steam machine, I don't want to press the wrinkles into it. So I just gave it a quick little press. Remember, I have to turn it over. Now let's look. Does it matter which way my design is going? Doesn't matter. So we're doing B. Again, we're on the back. Making sure the sticky is, I can feel the sticky on the drawn side. Okay, and I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to worry about trimming this off. I trimmed the other one off because it was kind of flopping around, but I'm just going to put that right there. I'm going to turn it over for a minute and go, no, that's pretty wild. So this is going to be my stripe, and I got a little wrinkle in it. So I want to turn it over. Now, just as a little aside for you, if this is the first video tutorial you've watched with me, I teach as I would be making this by myself. So if I stop to iron something, it's because that's what happens in real life. You're going along and you pick out fabric and you forget to iron. Well, if I stop to iron in the class, that's going to remind you that you have to iron. So that's how I do it. So now I've got to decide, do I want it this way or this way? I think I'll go this way. Even though I'd be wasting less fabric going in the opposite direction. I think I want to be in this direction. And I'm going to be right down here, and maybe I'll catch a couple of those little arcs. So remember, flipping it over to the back. And if it makes a difference to you which way this goes and which way your fabric goes, you want to pay attention to that. So I'm going to go ahead and put mine down. And see how I was, let me move down a little bit more. Because what I was trying to do, let's see if you can see it. See, there's a little arc there. Where'd my little arc go there? Oh, got to go a little more this way, to the left. Okay. Now, there's a little arc right by my thumb. There's part of another arc. So it just gives it a little more interest. And then I will go ahead and cut this one because that's a lot more fabric than I need. Okay, and I'm just going to hold that right there for the moment. And again, if I wanted to use this in more than one place, I don't have to have every fabric different. Okay, so this is going to be going on here. So I'm going to keep my B and the B together. So next I have, let's do the D. So I've got D, which is this egg, and I've got A, which is, let me push it down a little bit. Hold on. Well, you still can't see it. There he is. So that's A, and that's D. So I'm going to do D next. And I want to look and see what I've got left for fabrics. So I got this little bit of purple. I've got this kind of turquoisey color. I've got another thing. So I'm not gonna use this one because remember I have the polka dot. So I think that I'll make this fabric will be D, and then this will be the border coming through. Okay, and again, little ironing. So I've got to flip this one over. This is my D. Feeling for the sticky. And I've got to decide if I need this to be any place special. I don't really, because this big band is going to be coming across there. So, oh, dropped one. So this will be my band. So I'm just going to put my D right there. I want to flip my fabric to the back. This is my D band. It's this little part right here. And you just need to pay attention if you have a directional fabric and it's important to you which direction it's going in. That's up to you. Okay, so there's D. And the last one I have left is A. I'm going to give that a little press. I'm going to flip that over to the back. Here's my A, egg. And then this is the most important part I wanted to show you. Gave it a little press. Now, two things I have to pay attention to. I've got the salvage here, and if you look close, you can see there's little dots there, and that's part of the salvage, so I want to stay away from that. But you see how I can lay both of my fabrics, both of my zigzags down in one spot. So I'm just going to trim this a little closer only because I want to make sure that I'm away from that salvage. So now I can place that down, and that way it's much easier to cut this out the way we did, because a lot of times you'll have leaves, you might have 10 leaves, or you might have 5 flowers that are the same color. Anytime you have the same color, even if it's a different piece to a different part of your design. So this A goes with this, but if I had another piece of one of the other eggs and I wanted to use this same fabric, I would have moved my paper when I traced this, moved it over to that shape and traced it right next to it so I could get it all onto the same fabric. Sometimes you can't get it all on the same fabric. If you have a little tiny piece, you have to kind of finagle it a little bit. But for the most part, the point of me showing you this is pieces that are the same, going on the same fabric, can be traced together even if they're on different parts of the pattern. Okay? So now we've got all our pieces accounted for, and that really is the hardest part, is deciding what color you want to do for which part of your design. But now we've got all the pieces on, so our next process is going to be to do some pressing with the iron. Pressing is up and down, ironing is going around. So we just want to press up and down. So that'll be what we do next. So get your ironing station ready. Regular iron. I have my small iron, your ironing board, pressing mat, however you're going to iron, and we'll get pressing.